Hey, I apologize this artificial ugly lighting, but I wanted to show you this camera and it is all black. You wouldn't be able to see anything if I just had my regular natural light coming from the windows. A few episodes back I briefly introduced my latest purchase. This is a Graflex RB, that stands for rotating back, Series B. It is a very interesting camera, and now that I have shot more with this, I thought that I will give you a more proper overview of this camera and sort of introduce it. It's been a lot of fun. Let me first go through the features, then I talk a little bit about my challenges with this camera, talk about pros and cons, we're gonna take a look at a few pictures, and of course I do something crazy with this camera. Now, it opens like this and exposes a Kodak f4.5 lens. That's 5.5 inches. I guess that's about 135 millimeters. My lens here, it is in a very nice condition. I noticed that they came up with a few different lenses during the production of this camera model. You can screw it in and out, but I don't know what's the availability of these lenses as separate interchangeable lenses. This lens mount, unlike in other bigger Graflexes, you can't change this. This is attached here and you are not supposed to change it. I guess it's possible to find a lens that would screw in here. I haven't really looked and I don't know. I'm happy with this for the time being. There's a bellows and the lens moves forward and back, and this is also how you focus it. And when you're done with your photography, you close it and it protects the lens. So the lens cover sort of comes with the package. I like the way it opens. Then it has a viewfinder that looks a little bit silly. It's this kind of a really tall chimney. And even though the glass here is a little bit dim, this really blocks the light so perfectly that it is not that difficult to focus it. First I thought, that's kind of the pain in the neck, but it's not. And I have managed to get really sharp pictures with this, even with the full aperture open. So focusing is very doable with this camera. Now, as it is an SLR camera, single lens reflex, there's a mirror that tilts and all that. It is basically a fairly modern camera, even though they started to build these in 1898. Now, the most interesting part of Graflex by far is this machinery here. This is how you adjust the speed. The aperture here is in this aperture ring, like in most of the cameras, but this is how you set the speed, and it is a little bit complex when you start with it, but it kind of makes a lot of sense. There are two different aspects or elements when you set the speed. There is the tension of the spring that releases the curtain shutter, and this is where you adjust the tension. And then there's another one here that you select the slit, the kind of the opening in the curtain shutter that selects how much light goes in. And with the combination of the speed and the size of the slit, you define the speed. Sounds complex? Let me show you so it kind of makes sense. So first of all, let me set the tension to number 1. This is now the least amount of speed, least amount of tension. And then I start to rotate this, and as you can see, I'm sort of rotating the shutter upwards. So here's the first slit. It is this big. Now this is the biggest slit, so-called A. Then there's a B slit, C, and then finally D. So the smaller the slit, and the faster the speed of the curtain, the faster is the speed of the camera. So then, when you have cocked the shutter, by selecting the right slit and the right tension, then you take the picture by pressing this shutter release knob here. And it takes the picture by, you know, moving the curtain shutter. Like this. So now this sounds pretty complicated, but it actually isn't once when you get your head around it. There is this table at the side of each and every Graflex that shows you a matrix. There's a matrix of the aperture, meaning the size of the slit. It's not the aperture of the lens. This is a little bit confusing name, but it is just the size of the slit. And then the tension of this tension knob. And if you say want to have the speed, let's say 1/100th of the second, you would take a look at here. It would say that you need to have a curtain aperture B and the tension number 4. So first I would set the tension to 4. Like this. Now it says 4. And then I would set the curtain aperture, meaning the slit side, to B. And now I would know this camera would take a picture with 1/100th of a second. Now one of the things that you easily mess up with is that you keep your hands somewhere here. And this rotates when you take the picture, so you need to make sure that your hand won't interact or won't, you know, mess up the rotation of this little lever here. Now of course then you can leave the aperture or the slit totally open, and you can take long exposures with this too. I find this mechanism fascinating. I mean, it is something that wouldn't come up in any modern design. This is so kind of genius and at the same time so stupid and complex. But it allows such an old camera to go all the way up to 1/1000th of the second speed, which is pretty amazing. And it also allows pretty detailed and accurate speed settings. I mean, how many cameras have speed settings like 240, 280, 320, 360, 400, like with such a short intervals. I think this is pretty cool. One thing that you need to remember, that after you've taken all your pictures for that, you know, setting, then you need to make sure that you release the tension and let these things go loose. It's not to keep your Graflex stored with all tension full in your shutter. That would ruin the spring and the tensioner there. Now then, there is a question of the film backs. This is so-called RB, rotating back. So you can take vertical pictures and then you can rotate the film back and take landscape pictures. This is pretty cool. Now my camera came with only one film back. This is kind of a simple sheet film adapter that takes 6x9 sheet film. The problem of course being that you know, not many manufacturers make these films anymore. So I wanted to get a film back that takes roll film, just a regular medium size 120 film. There are plenty of those available, but unfortunately Graflex have totally messed up the whole back compatibility issue. And not only with this camera, I mean all the Graflex backs are, you know, that's a mess, like how they name them and how they are compatible and whatnot. In this case, there are two types of different backs. So now this camera has what is called a Graflex back. And then there's another one that is called a graphic back. Now, think about this naming, like a graphic back and then the Graflex back for the camera that is called a Graflex. Both 6x9, but not compatible. The difference between these backs is up here. Mine has a little sort of a hole here, And then the graphic bag, which is much more common, has sort of two little mountains or hills, and they are not comparable. Now, unfortunately, this bag that I have is notoriously difficult to find. But the lucky thing is that if you have the other kind of a bag, you can make it to fit into these bags, but not the other way around. So, I found on eBay, only $25, a roll film bag for my Graflex, but unfortunately it was of a wrong type. So I somehow needed to make this bag to fit into this kind of a setting, even though this was wrong. So once again, you need some simple tools. You need some black paint, you need a hacksaw, and you need a file. I mean, last time when I fixed this, I needed a wrench and a flathead screwdriver, so now I need a file, a hacksaw, and some paint. I like the tool setting for Graflex. So what I did was that I removed the little hills, just filing them away. This is some kind of a very soft alloy, so it was fairly simple to do that. Then I took a hacksaw and I created this little hole here with the hacksaw, you know, similar to this one. And then I need to take a little bit this metal out from the sides here too with the hacksaw, because this bag wants to have a little, you know, notches here. And then for some reason that I really don't know why, this was a fraction of a millimeter wider than the one that I have, so I needed to take a little bit out of the metal from the sides with a file. And then as I have filed and hacksaw this away, you know, it was all shiny metal, so then eventually I painted it black to prevent all kind of light leaks. Now it took me only like 15 minutes to do it, and since I had the original on me, the right one, it was very easy for me to see, you know, that I did the right thing. So what I've successfully done then is that with a hacksaw and a file, I modified the bag, the so-called graphic bag, to fit into a Graflex bag. And these, you know, that I need to modify, these are much more common and easier to come by. So if you ever interested in this one, you know, don't be afraid, like you can easily make and modify these, not the other way around though. So now I can put my roll film back here, and suddenly I have 8 pictures on a roll film that I can take both horizontally and vertically. And since that, I haven't really used my sheet film holder because this is so much handier. This is pretty much similar to a Hasselblad bag, so that it opens. Then there is a little thingy like this where you put the film, and it's very easy to use. So I managed to fix the bag. I have now a roll film bag. And then earlier, a few weeks ago, I set the tension properly here with the help of the Graflex parts advice. But ever since that, I've shot a couple of rolls of film and it started to work sort of snappier and snappier. I guess, you know, when you use these cameras, they kind of like it. So I needed to lower the tension a little bit, but it's pretty easy to do with the help of the guidance from the Graflex parts. It seems to be working fine now. All the exposures are correct. Let's take a look at a few pictures that I've taken with this camera so far. then of course I wanted to do something different, like I always do. This is an SLR camera, and with all SLR cameras that have an independent shutter, there's a possibility to do some freelancing. Now that means that you remove the original lens and then you take any other lens. Like I took the Kiev 80mm Volna 3 lens, and it goes pretty nicely here if you turn it, you know, upside down, wrong way around, and press it against the lens mount here, and then you can take pictures like this. You don't need to you just keep it with your hands here. I guess this is called freelancing in higher circles, you know. And I took a few pictures like this using this Volna. I used also Helios 44 for the heck of it. I used a Hasselblad Distagon 50mm lens. Now, since the distance from the lens to the film is pretty long, most of the lenses only focus on a very short distances, so you can use these only as macros. At least I don't have any other lenses than the original one that goes this far away, so there's a limit, but you know, it was a lot of fun. I get pictures like this. Well, as you can see, I kind of like this camera. It sort of fits into my style of photography, and I kind of like the quirkiness and odd features. So pros and cons. Cons, it's pretty heavy and bulky. I mean, it's a small Graflex, but it's still pretty big. It's a bit complex to use. I mean, I get faster and faster with these settings, but it still is more complex than just setting the time. You need to look at this table and all that. But you get used to it, but you know, it's part of the charm, but it is a bit complex. And then it's hard to get parts, like with the backs and all that. Especially here in Europe, they did not import this camera into Europe at all. So all the ones that you might have are individually brought here. So it's a little bit difficult to find. Those of you living in the US, there seems to be plenty of these available. And then pros, there are plenty. First of all, hardly any camera, any other camera that I own has such a physical presence and such a, you know, nice feeling to it. I mean, look at these knobs, now showing some bronze through. Gorgeous, so beautiful. The mechanical feeling. The sound. And then, hey, it's made of mahogany, covered in leather. You know, and then there's a resource called graflex.org. And there was this gentleman, I think just on his free time, helping people with these cameras. And he helped me to date this camera. You know, the name of this guy is Charles Mundy. And he, I guess, has some papers from the original Graflex factory. And he said that this camera was built either in a very late of 48, early 49. So it's not that old, but it's still pretty old. So every time you take a picture with this camera, it is not a snapshot. It is not that you would casually just point and shoot. It is every time an occasion. It's like a celebration. It's something that I don't think I have experienced with a lot of other cameras.